The world is a weird place right now, and I wanted to do what I can in order to help it. And the thing that I know how to do is sew. So this particular face mask that I'm going to be showing you how to make is the easiest and still most effective that I have found. The masks that I'm making look like this. They have the pleats so that when you put them on your face, they come apart and cover more of it. They have a bendable nose area in the front, that way it contours to your nose. And then in the back, they also have a pocket where you can put a filter in them. And then they just slip over your face like that. I'm going to go ahead and disclaim a couple things. Number one, this is a fabric mask and therefore not very protective on its own. There is a pocket for filters where you can put a filter in. I'm making these specifically to donate to healthcare workers and hospitals in my area, and they're putting it over existing N95 masks, which just prolongs the use of them. However, the CDC is now recommending that everybody wear a face mask. This one will work for you. At the end of the day, even if you don't have a filter in it, this will cover your face and cover your nose and mouth. That way you're not absent-mindedly touching it, and it will also keep anything like coughing and sneezing and whatnot within the mask, and it won't get all over everything. If you are making this and planning on donating them, I've seen a lot of places ask that you use a different fabric for the front and the back. That way it's easier to differentiate. It's important to note that these are made out of 100% cotton fabric. I've read that that is the best and most effective fabric to use. So everything that you're gonna need in order to make your face mask is as follows. You're going to need cotton fabric. I would suggest 2 patterns. I like using a nice pattern on the front and then a plain color on the back. That way it's just easier to tell which side is which. You're gonna need elastic or ribbon. I'm gonna use elastic in the tutorial. Scissors, you definitely need scissors, hopefully fabric scissors. It'll make your life a lot easier. You're gonna need a sewing machine. I would not suggest sewing this by hand. You're definitely gonna need thread. Obviously, you're gonna need lots of pins because the pleats are kind of difficult without pins. You're going to need an iron. The iron will make your life so much easier, I promise. You're going to need a safety pin, and you're gonna need pipe cleaners, or like a thin metal wire, and that's what's going to be used to bend around the nose. Before starting any of this, you should wash and dry your fabric. You definitely want it pre-shrunk, but you also want to make sure that it is clean and not germy. So for measurements, you're going to want your nice piece of fabric, the pretty one that you want on the front, to be 9.5 inches wide by 7.5 inches tall. And for the back of the mask, you're going to want 2 pieces of fabric that are 7.5 inches wide by 5.25 inches tall. And you're going to want those to be the plain fabric, the less pretty fabric, whatever fabric that you are putting on the back. It's 1 piece of fabric for the front and 2 separate pieces of fabric for the back. That way they can make the filter pocket. Every time I sew something that I know I'm going to be sewing multiple of and making a lot of, I cut out pieces of cardboard and I use those as my pattern. So the first step is taking the 2 back pieces of fabric. You take those and you're going to want to iron them flat. Make sure they're nice and pressed, and then you're going to want to fold the top down about 1/4 inch, maybe a little bit more. Make sure it's straight, and then you're going to want to iron that down. Once you iron that down, you can sew it just like a little hem. You just sew a straight line. I usually do about 1/4 inch seam allowance, maybe to the end of the presser foot. The most important thing here is that you're sewing in a straight line. It's going to make the project look a whole lot neater if you are for sure sewing in a straight line. Once you have the hem on your first piece of your backing fabric, you're gonna do the same exact thing to the other piece of fabric. So you want 2 identical pieces of fabric with about 1/4 inch hem. And then once you've done that, you're going to grab the front fabric that you chose, the bigger piece of fabric that has the nice pattern on it, and you're going to place it pretty side up. You want the pattern facing you. And then you want to iron that and make sure it looks nice and pretty. The ironing seems excessive, but honestly it makes such a difference. And then once you have that facing up, you're going to take your 2 back flaps and you're going to line up the edges. So you're going to want the nice side, which is the one that I'm showing you right now, where you cannot see this. This is the ugly side. You want the nice sides to touch, and you want to line them up at the top and the bottom in the middle of the fabric. So see how there's about the same amount of pretty front fabric on either side of this back flap? That's what you want. And then you line the other one up at the bottom, making sure that both of the hemmed nice sides are facing down. and that both of the hem sides are facing towards the middle. It doesn't matter which one's on top as long as they're both facing the correct way and they're in the middle of the larger piece of fabric. And then you're gonna pin those down and then sew along the top edge. We're sewing the top, not the sides. Once you have that sewn, you're going to want to flip it and press open the seams. Sometimes you can get away without doing this, but it does make the project look a whole lot nicer if you press open the seams. And then you're going to want to fold the flaps in both sides. Now you have the nice side of the fabric facing down and your flaps the right way. This is the way that the mask is going to be when it's finished. This is where you're going to be inserting the pipe cleaner. It's not 100% necessary, but it does make it fit better to your face. Get you one of these bad boys. This is literally just a craft store pipe cleaner. I just fold it and cut it in half, and then we're good to go. Don't forget to fold in the edges because these are sharp. They will poke through the fabric. Now that you have the little pipe cleaner, what you want to do is find the top of your mask. This one, it doesn't really matter because the pattern goes all over, but if you have a pattern where there's a clear top and bottom, you want this to be on the top of the mask. And I'm putting it on the back right now because it needs to be in the middle of the back flaps. So find the middle. You're gonna wanna mark it with something. I'm gonna put a pin and then just use my finger right here to find where I need to start sewing. And then I'm gonna flip it over because I like to sew on the front of it. It just looks better to me. And then I'm going to sew a line down and over, but I'm going to stop where my marker pin is. I'm not gonna sew back up. Just straight down. And then if you leave your needle in your fabric, you can lift the foot up and just twist the fabric. That way you don't have to find the same place to put your needle down again. You can see the stitch down and the stitch over, but there's not a stitch back up here. That's because we're going to shove this pipe cleaner in there. Make sure everything is good and then just shove the pipe cleaner in the little slot that you made. It should go all the way. And then you're just gonna sew a line straight down and finish that off. If you skipped the pipe cleaner step, this is where you're going to start off again. We're looking at the back of it. Flaps are flapped down and we're gonna sew along the edge here and along the edge here. And now is the most difficult part of the entire project, which is the pleats. It does take a little bit of work to find a method that works well for you. Everything is sewn down. All of the edges are closed. You have your little pocket here now. Flip over your fabric. Make sure the part where you have your pipe cleaner is at the top, or whatever you're determining the top of your mask is at the top. If you put the pipe cleaner in, that is the top. You don't want it around your mouth, you want it around your nose. The pleats are the hardest part, but what I do is I kind of shove my fingers in there like that and then just fold it down and I pin my fold. So I have my first pleat and then I just grab the fabric again the same exact way and I fold it down. And then I pin it again in the middle and then I take it one more time like this, fold it down. Pin it again in the middle. Looks kind of crazy. It looks like an accordion, but you can make it neater. This is the part where I make sure all of these pleats are even. I make sure they're not, you know, spread apart, because if they're spread apart already, it's going to make the mask look kind of funny. And then I do take my iron and I iron down the pleat. That way it stays in place while I'm sewing. Personally, I don't pin this part just because I feel like it gets in the way, but after I've ironed it, I sew it. And you want to sew as close as possible to the original stitch. It makes it easier to hold these really tight as they go through, because if they're loose, they will come apart. And then you just want to repeat with the other side, making sure that the pleats match, that they're even. And we're in the home stretch. This is pretty much what the mask is going to end up looking like. You're going to flip it over onto the back side, and these little edges, we want to fold them twice. So fold it in half and then fold it again. That way the raw edge is hidden and you're creating a channel for the elastic to go through. I find it easier to just hold it down while I'm sewing this straight line, but you can pin it if that makes it easier for you. And it should come out looking something like that. Obviously that's not perfect, but something is better than nothing. And then for good measure, I'm just gonna iron it one more time, make sure all the pleats are nice and pressed down. And then you essentially have your mask. We just have to add the elastic. We're gonna cut 12 inches of elastic. And then we're gonna do it again because we need 2 pieces of elastic. So I'm just going to measure off of the one that I've already cut. This is 1/4 inch elastic. I would suggest something smaller, but this is all I have. This is where the safety pin comes in. Put the safety pin through one side of the elastic and then shove the safety pin through the holes on the side of your mask. This way that the elastic doesn't get lost midway through, and then pull it out on the other side. Make sure your elastic is flat and not twisted, and then just tie it in a knot. If it makes you feel more comfortable, you can also sew it, but I have never in my life had a problem with elastic knots coming undone. That's just something that holds a knot really well. Make sure to, you know, pull it and everything's good. Cut off the excess. And all you do is just feed it through so that that knot is hidden, and then you've got one side of the mask done. So then you just do the exact same thing with the other piece of elastic and you're good to go. And then you have a mask that looks something like this. Strange times we live in, but now you have a face mask that works. So these are reusable, 100% machine washable, and better than nothing. If you don't know how to sew and you don't have access to a sewing machine, but you still want a mask or you want to help in any way, I will be selling these on my Etsy, which is going to be linked down below. I normally make scrunchies and other things, but my shop is transitioned into a complete mask making shop for the time being because that is what the world needs right now. I'm donating as many as I can to healthcare workers in my area, but fabric's not cheap, fabric's not free. So if you do want one for yourself, the masks will be on my Etsy. And for every mask that is purchased from my store, I am donating a mask to somebody in my area that works in healthcare or works somewhere on the front line that needs face protection and doesn't have any. I'd love to be strictly 100% donating, but you know, materials aren't cheap and most of us don't have jobs right now. If you don't want a mask, I have other stuff in my shop like scrunchies and keychains, and if you want to be able to support the cause without buying a mask, if you already have one, whatever, you can also buy that stuff and it will go towards the same fund. It will be put in my fabric fund. Thank you for watching. I hope this made it easier to understand how to make a mask, how to protect yourself. Hopefully it is something that you can be doing to help people in your area.